right, welcome everybody. So I'm here with Damien. That's how you say your name, right?
Damien, yeah.
All right. I met him on X. We've had some really good discussions. I want to say in the last 2-3 weeks, like some really serious back and forth. Not a debate or anything, but just sharing sources. Like I would say something, and he may or may not disagreed with me. If he agreed with me, he showed me a link. If he disagreed with me, he'll show me a link, and we'll go talk about, okay, for the most part, if we agreed with each other, there wasn't nothing else needed to be said, because I mean, we agreed with each other, right? But
Right.
then if either one of us disagreed with each other's information or post that was on X, um, we actually would share a source. And that's actually interesting, because a lot of people don't show sources. A lot of people, what they usually do is that they'll say, well, this is what this person said on YouTube, or this is what this person said in their book, right? And then lo and behold, because just like you was telling me before we even started, that you have a whole bunch of books too. I like to brag about books. I don't know why. I think books is just amazing. I love to brag about them. I don't think it's not done enough. But he said he had a lot of books also. And just throwing back sources back and forth to each other when we disagreed with each other or something, it helps us to understand everybody's thoughts when it comes into why they believe what they believe in. Me personally, I didn't ask you, but me personally, I really don't share my opinion too much. I do it a little bit here and there, but I can argue my way depending on the sources that I have. Either way, I try to, if I agree with if I read a book and I agree with something, I have to find somebody that says that individual is incorrect, and then I have to read their material and see why they say that person's incorrect. Then I got read somebody else's material, and I keep just reading sources until I come to like my basic understanding. But before we get into any of what we're going to talk about, because we're going to have a lot of subjects today to talk about, why don't you just tell everybody where they can find you at? I know, like I already said, I can find you on X. That's how I found you. So
Hi, everyone. I'm Damien Marie at Hope, and you can just Google my name and it'll probably come up. My website is damienmarieatthope.com. So it's easy, and I'm on. If you go to my website, the links are there for X, Twitter, and I'm on Facebook and on Blue Sky, and I have an academia researcher account. And I also, you can see it there. And I also have my website, and I have a blog. My thing was I didn't ever decide to come into this, on purpose. My thing is I went to school to be a drug and alcohol counselor, and doing that, they made me take a course on, actually 2 courses on religion. So I could counsel other people of different faiths. And halfway through the class on the Bible, I became an atheist, because they started, like you were talking about, showing facts. They started showing facts and how Mesopotamia relates to, the ideas that the Bible talks about, but doesn't in a way archaeologically that's much older. That's also what made me get into archaeology. I didn't really like books because I didn't like people's opinion. What I like to do is, what is the facts? And then when I understand the wealth of the facts, then I can understand the opinion. Now, I do agree that it's good to have experts that say their opinion or say what the facts, how they relate. But if I don't know what they're saying, it's like if they're talking another language, especially when I first started. And so I didn't, my personal thing was, I just wanted to understand facts. And so, like, here's one that the art that you shared for a second is from this book. It's about animism. And then I also, I read a book on the Near East and on ancient knowledge and reasoning, but also on how supernatural is natural. And talking about the Americas, I have a whole book on pre-Columbian. And I have another gigantic book on pre-Columbian stuff also.
That's a nice one right there.
Right? Big book. And here's the biggest I have actually, which this thing is, I hated reading it. It's so hard to hold. It's about the archaeology and history and stuff of Turkey, because I realized researching, I had thought that religion was only like the most 12,000 years old, right? It was some new fad. But the more I learned, the more I realized, boy, that's wrong. And so I had to then keep getting more books. And here's another book on,
I got that one right there. Yeah, I have that one right there.
Oh, that's right. So,
I have that one right there.
Book on religion, another big archaeology book on the archaeology handbook of ritual and religion, which I thought actually failed to me, because how can you do all this stuff, and then it gets to Christianity, Islam, doesn't give almost anything. I was like, man, I wanted to write to these people and say, you know what? I was really disappointed. You went hardcore explaining all this detail and all these different features of religion. Then you get to the ones everyone knows about and you had almost nothing to say. I feel that's, to me personally, shameful. But I mean, that's my personal opinion. And then also other religion. But I had many more books. And I also donated. I read a bunch and I donated because I moved a lot, and it's just a pain to have like this huge library of books that I read.
Yeah.
But why I don't talk about books, like I know you talk about books all the time, and I think it's great. I actually don't like reading. I'm from the ghetto, from Southern California. I was raised around gangs and stuff, and my mentality is I actually don't even like school. So, but the reason I did read all these books and learn is simply because I wanted to stop being ignorant. I wanted to know. Yeah. Once I became an atheist, for me personally, it wasn't like I went, okay, gods are not real, religion is false, and atheists have the answer. My thing was, holy shit, I've been lied to my whole damn life. I don't even know who to believe. That was more my thing. And so me researching wasn't to somehow prove God's wrong or atheists right or anything. It was just, I wanted to know what happened. And then once I started learning what happened, I started sharing with other people, and they're like, man, you should write a book. And that's when I started to write my book, which to me is The Tree of Lies and Its Hidden Roots, exposing the evolution. I'll send you a file. Exposing the evolution of religion and removing the rationale of faith. And so for me, that was a journey more than, like, for some people, like they have some goal. My goal was just to find out what I can understand is true. And some of the things that atheists believe, or say, because a lot of them say they don't believe in belief, which is, I feel foolish, because there's no such thing as having beliefs, or not having beliefs. People have beliefs. The question is, are the beliefs accurate? Are they supported, like you said, about was from sources or from evidence? But everyone has beliefs. In fact, thinking you don't have a belief is itself a belief. But anyways, one of the things that a lot of atheists say is religion was invented to control people. Wrong. Religion was not invented. Religion emerged out of, in a sense, fear of the unknown or the feeling of lack of control. And also that even children, a lot of them, up until, which that one book at the beginning, and the art about animism, is that children up to 7 have a natural tendency to see the world through a magical explanation. Like, if you don't know, have critical and logical thinking, when you see the world, a tree falls or a wind blows, you can give it magical agency, just like you can have a doll and you can think, well, this doll is a person or a being or something. But once you get a certain age, you stop thinking that way. Well, that's also because culture, at least now, more scientific culture, doesn't promote staying in that mentality. But certainly ancient cultures with lacking science, that would be a great explanation. Why does the wind come? Well, there's a thing that pushes it. I mean, so animism, to me, I realized, is like this core thing that all religions have. Everybody. So that's also the thing I realized, is it's not either or. Like some people say, well, that's a shaman. So they're not animists. Wrong. And a shaman is an animist totemist, probably. They have multiple things. And then a paganist is, in a sense, a shamanist, totemist, animist. They have all of them. And then current world religions are a paganist, shamanist, totemist, animist. They have all of it. Like you're stacking up these ideas. And so that's also why I have the tree of lies, this whole structure that holds all these other like branches and then all these little ideas. Because everyone sees them as completely separate, but that to me is completely inaccurate. It's not that every single religion is connected to every other single religion, but the ideas that give the foundation to all of them are not so different and did move in cultural migrations around the world. And this is my belief and what the evidence I can show. And like I always tell people, that a lot of the people the archaeologists and anthropologists, historians that follow me are the same ones that attack people like Graham Hancock like daily or Jimmy Corsetti daily. but they don't do that to me. Because they always go, oh, they're so close-minded. Really? Because they don't do that to me. And sometimes they share my stuff. And I've had videos.
It's because they got to hit the big dogs, man. They want to hit the people that got the millions of followers so they can get famous off of their work. That's why I find it so funny, because I'm just like, yo, okay, if you don't like that person's work, okay, share the facts then. Attack everybody that talks about it, right? Like they pick and choose who they attack. Yeah.
Well, they attack small accounts also. I'm just making a comment that I'm friends with all of them and none of them attack me. In fact, I would say maybe
well, that's because y'all friends.
What's that?
I said that's because y'all friends, man. They're not gonna.
Well, but the reason I'm friends is not because they gifted me that position. It's because, like you said about sharing stuff, a couple times they'll say something to me, but I have information. I have stuff that backs up what I'm saying or why this is not unreasonable, at least, even if they didn't agree. Like one guy said to me, the ideas from the Middle East, he said it didn't go to the Americas. And I said, oh, okay, I get it. You need to see how it went from the Middle East to the Balkans, which is like the area of Europe. And then from there, it went to Ukraine. And then from there, it went to Siberia. And then from Siberia, it went to the Americas. Once I showed him all the steps and how the ideas could have done this through the DNA, through the artifacts, then he's like, oh, okay. So what I'm saying is that I didn't become friends because they decided, oh, I'm just going to let Damien be my friend. And also, sometimes I disagree with them. Obviously, like I said, I think that things are connected in deep ways that they don't always acknowledge. And I always say that I feel like one of the issues is they're not like me looking at all the DNA as hard as I have, because they're doing the archaeology, but they're not doing DNA. Well, I look at all the archaeology stuff and the DNA and the linguistics, which some don't do that either. Even if they did DNA as a science, they don't always look into language. I do. They don't always look into mythology, which is a whole nother thing. Like you said, you're a mythologist. I've also looked at the mythology. I think it's, to me personally, it's easy to focus on one area, like say history, or history. History doesn't mean you're doing DNA, and history doesn't mean you're doing mythology. Just like you acknowledge you're a historian and a mythologist. So these are different subjects. What I tried to do was look at all the subjects, DNA, archaeology, linguistics, and then also mythology. But then also you have to understand culture, because sometimes some things, like say one culture could have a spoon as the magical item, like in a totemist culture, and but another one has a spoon and it's a utilitarian item, or in other words, it doesn't have a religious purpose. And same thing with there's burials where they bury people with wine or beer, but that doesn't mean every time you find wine or beer it was religious in a sense. So I think that's also makes it complicated. Like you said before, I heard you, or maybe you wrote, I think maybe you said it in the video, I'm not sure, because I've watched a few of your videos, where you said that sometimes the the deity is listed as a father, sometimes as a brother, sometimes as a son. Yeah. And all those could be actually accurate depending on which representation or culture. Just like in Samaria, people think of Samaria as like the whole area had the same ideas, which I know you've addressed is not accurate. Samaria had several city states, and they all had a deity that they felt was their for their city alone. But that didn't mean other city states didn't also agree that was a deity, like in the pantheon that they could accept. And then also Nippur was considered, in a sense, sort of a holy place by many city states or whatever. So you could have, so, and yet they're all different. And so the different ones can have different ideas about how these, just like in Egypt. A lot of times people think of Egyptian mythology, even if you only picked one time, like say the beginning of all of it. There was several, in a sense, cities that had different ideas about how creation happened. So you could say, well, in the creation of the Egyptians, it had to do with ejaculating and sperm. That would be accurate to one city. Another city would say, no, it was a mound that came out of the primordial water. And another city would say something totally on top of that mound. It was a sun god, Ra, or whatever, you know. So the point is, yet that's what I'm trying to say is it's hard because let's say that an archaeologist studies one city or even a few cities. That doesn't mean that they've studied the mythology of Samaria or India, because a lot of people talk about the India being something separate. It really wasn't. LDNA, which male, why LDNA, went from the Middle East, especially around upper Mesopotamia and Iran, and it went over and started the Dravidian languages in India, which now people consider those their, indigenous languages. But so my point is that there's so many of these deep connections that if someone is only studying like a microscope and has all the data for one area, that really doesn't mean that they feel comfortable understanding all the other areas, which is, like I said, what I tried to do was the opposite of that, was both have a detailed yet big picture understanding.
Yeah, that's what I try to do. Like I try to look at everything. Like I mean, everything that I can possibly get to. I look at the culture, I look at the religion, the mythology, the pottery, the art, the language. And it's funny you say that because one of my favorite authors and historians is Godfrey Higgins. He wrote books in Anacalypsis Volume 1 and Volume 2, which is basically everything that we just talked about, like about religion, language, and all that other stuff. The only thing he doesn't talk about, of course, is DNA because they didn't have DNA back then. And he is usually the one guy that I seem to notice that a lot of people will quote when it comes to these type of things. Not like people on Twitter or X, anything like that, like scholars. His name popped up so much that I was like, man, let me go buy his book. And I found both his books. And he also has another one called Celtic Druids and tells you where the Celtic Druids might have came from. And he goes off of all the stuff that we talked about. And those books are very thick. I have some of the books that you just showed, especially the one with religion and violence. The reason why I laughed when you showed that book was because, man, that book opened up my eyes to a lot of stuff of what a lot of questions I had when it came to why this would happen this way and so on and so forth. So that book was, and what's so funny is that it's from, most of your books are from Oxford. That is actually one of my favorite places to get books from is Oxford. I have a lot of books from Oxford also. I actually have the Anatolia book that you have also, and I have one that's with the Hittites, I believe. I have one with Persian language. So I have the same, almost the same ones that you have, but in the same areas and stuff like that. And I just wanted to know where the original thing came from. Like you was talking about the sun. That's one of the things we were talking about before we started. The only reason why I say the sun is the first representation of a god, in a sense, is because of the simple fact that when it comes to what people worship the most is the sun. You gotta think about it. We need it for health to stay alive. First of all, heat. You know what I mean? And then photosynthesis to create the plants where the animals and all that other stuff survive on. And everybody needs the sun for survival here on this planet. Without it, nothing, barely anything would survive. I shouldn't say nothing would survive. Barely anything would survive. We wouldn't be able to really survive without the
Well, and then
animals.
and
Right?
the issue also is, like you said, the sun. So to me, that also is limited to more of an agricultural mentality, because when you go back to, in a sense, hunter gatherers, the moon, that's like they even talk about in the Americas, how many moons ago, the moon, that calendar, and I think Islam and in the Jews and other hunter gatherers is moon related, not sun related. And the first representations, like in the female holding a bullhorn, and they talk about that being the phases of the moon. And so in the first calendar, the oldest calendar 34,000 years ago is actually, and even NASA has a thing of it, is actually a moon calendar, and it has little pictures of the moon moving different phases. And so
You
I
said that
do
goes
agree
back
that,
34,000
yeah, 34,000 moon calendar.
moon calendar.
Yeah, or lunar calendar, depending. But yeah, so the moon actually was, and I don't see, but this is the thing. To me, every spiritual or supernatural being is not a god. That's, at least
Yeah.
as I understand. Let's put it that way. As I understand it, so I do not think gods were before 13,000. I absolutely think that pseudo ancestors, like for a clan, like the idea of, and spirits and supernatural beings, especially for animals like dogs, is probably 34,000 years old also, I think, spirits. But I don't think that the people talk a lot of times about Venus figurines. I don't think that any of those are gods. I think some of them, especially pregnant or thin, because everyone always shows the fat ones, but there's thin ones also. There's also different ages. When you look at it as a corpus of all the different Venus supposed figurines, even in the Paleolithic, there's actually the young ones that are skinny and whatever, like pre-mother in a sense, then pregnant mothers, and then also elderly, because even some of the pregnant or pregnant fat looking ones, whatever, don't look young, right? They don't look like young mothers or something in their teens or 20 or whatever. They look like elderly women that are fat. And I think that it's easy to just look at that and see all these naked, things and say, oh, that's one deity or something like the earth, whatever. But I think since there's a moon calendar, I also think it's likely that they relate to the moon. And the Venus figurines, like that's one of them, right? But that's not a young looking chick, right? That doesn't look like 20 years old, or the likelihood. I'm just saying. So look at it. One reason you can guess that is the boobs. Look how the boobs sag, right? They're not perky in any kind of way. Not saying that people can't be, in a sense, have sagging boobs and be younger, but if you look at all the different figurines, you're not going to think, oh, these are in the youngest, the healthiest part of their life. So I also think like the thing on her head is like a beaded thing, right? There's been graves that have been found where they have shell bead like hats. I think that covering the eyes is an important factor. Shamans often cover their eyes because when you can't see or you have damaged eyes, you can see into the afterlife. So I do believe that this is something, probably a pseudo ancestors more likely. But just like you said about deities, it has to be this or nothing. And I think this can represent fertility in the, not in the sexual sense, but in the bounty, that she's able to be fat in the time that they're hunter-gatherers, where being fat would have been an outliner. That means you're eating well, right? Because you're not eating, not sitting somewhere where you can eat. You also have to move all the time. So
a blessing. Yeah.
Right. So I think that there may or may not have been fat women, right? Or at least one that was, but it probably was elder and probably related to shamanism, the hat, seeing stuff over the face. And I have art that I can show you that I made that relates to that understanding of the face coverings, because there's actual artifacts that relate to that. And so to me, I see it. I don't see those as deities. Let's put it this way. I do think they could be ancestors. I do think that they could be some sort of a pseudo clan shaman, maybe even a real person that died that then they make different things of, but it's not. It's more like you're relating to a mascot than just a simple person. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, here I just shared the art with you about the face coverings, and the ones on the outside, the art are different face coverings from China, from Africa, from Asia, just showing they're all doing face coverings. I just sent you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'm bringing it up. What I was doing was while you was talking, I don't know if you was able to see it, I was bringing up sources that you was talking about. A lot of people, what you said was very interesting, because I didn't know about the bead things, and I didn't know about the eye covering things. So that's actually interesting. I do know about the shamans and how they think if you cover your eyes, that's when you're supposed to use your third eye. So kind of, sort of, that's the best, easiest way to use it. Yeah. So, a lot of people always say, well, Wikipedia says this. Well, what I like to do is to show people, like, if you don't have enough money to buy books, like I was talking to you about before we started, there's a lot of websites where you can get books for free. And a lot of the books is on sacred-text.com. And you can go to that archive.gov, I believe, website that I usually show. If you go to Wikipedia, you have to go to where they say the source is at. So if they have like a number by that source, click on it and see where they got that source at. And I did that with one of them, which I was just showing earlier. Here, I'll show it real quick. I did that with this one right here, where it shows, this article deals with the time of Willendorf figurines and new results of Paleolithic research in Lower Austria. So this right here is actually, they give you sources to go to, and for people to go do. And that's what I like to do, is that when people are talking, I like to show sources at the same time, because what it does is it shows that, okay, look, first of all, I'm not arguing that this is what I believe. I'm only arguing this is what I've read. Now show me where somebody else said something. If you say this book says it, then now you got to give me time to get that book, and then I remember what you said. Then I can go in there and talk to you about it later on. So I like the sources. So that's pretty interesting about the idea of them being bigger, because of the simple fact that if it goes back 30,000 years, supposedly, historically, scientifically, they say that we were hunters and gatherers. Somebody like that wouldn't be able to hunter and gather around. So that means, what were they able to do to be able to have that person sustain, first of all, that level of weight on themselves, right? And two, able to cover their eyes. So meaning that they weren't there was something in between that. So that's why it makes sense. 30,000 years ago, hunters and gatherers, that means you're moving all the time. And that means you're only eating what you're gathering. You know what I'm saying? And you might not gather something every single day. So how's this right here possible? Or is this shown as a well, I mean, that was that. Yeah, I actually like that. That was actually pretty good. You
and
got
I
another one right here.
This is, to me, the oldest shaman for sure. And it already is connected to a dog-like animal. She has a fox head, and she was wrapped up, and she has the first damaged eye. And then the damaged eye, I think, becomes the covering. Because coverings actually over the eyes really happen after this point. in a sense, or right around this point, like it emerges. This also in Czechoslovakia has mammoth scapula over her body, and they have the oldest in this area of symbols on the mammoth scapula. So I think it's not language. I think it's probably magical symbols.
You know, it's so crazy that you say that, bro. And you know, I always tell people what I used to do in my interviews, because I used to talk about it before that, I used to send my guests 10 questions that I was going to ask them. Okay. That meant that they got to prepare themselves for the questions, avoid whatever they wanted to avoid, and so on and so forth. I stopped doing that only because I started catching on that some of them were just some of them were trying to avoid the question even after that, like, hey, we shouldn't ask this and we shouldn't ask, or you shouldn't ask that. So it's fun. So what I'm basically saying is that I don't there's no script to this. And it's interesting you brought this up with the eye and thing like that. I think you shared that on X a couple of days ago or a week ago or something. I can't remember. But what struck me with curiosity is as soon as I seen that, or if I found it in your page somehow, I ran to all my books in my library and I grabbed out this Norse mythology book. Now, we wasn't even going to talk about Norse. We never talked about Norse mythology ever on X. This is actually our first time. The only reason why I put this in the description is because of this post that I think that you had on X, or is on your blog or something like that. I ran there and I was like, yo, this reminds me of what happened to Odin. Now, just either earlier today or no, just yesterday, because I was doing some more research, I started putting two to two together to realize when people started saying that Odin and Jesus Christ has similarities for their resurrection, I guess you can say, their type, I guess you could say, when they was hung on the tree, the cross for Jesus speared on the right side or the left side, depending on what text you go off of, I guess. But the way they were crucified was almost identical.
Well, I wouldn't say almost identical, but I do agree with you that Odin also was one that would promote shamanism. This is shamanism stuff. I gave you another link to all the symbols across the world, 32 symbols, and they look like they start in France, which is, to me, is totemism. But and totemism, in a sense, is a cultural religious persuasion, where shamanism is more like an afterlife and spirit world persuasion. So totemism I see as the earth, in a sense, ideas, and then more naturalistic. And shamanism is almost exclusively not natural, in a sense. But
right.
But yeah, so Odin actually promotes and promoted and was probably a shaman and promoted shamanism. And yes, it is not unusual for him to have an eye issue. And then also just like Jesus, in a sense, Odin sacrificed himself almost to himself, which is very similar in a sense what Jesus did. And I see that, like you're right. There's a category of deities called living and dying gods, I think is what it's called. And they're both part of that. It also is in Egypt about the deity being cut up and then being brought back to life. So, and I don't think it has to be, because I think people sometimes get on the particulars of like Jesus is particularly like this, instead of getting that the theme is the same for sure. Homo sapiens didn't understand the supernatural until ancient Egypt. That's totally false.
Tell.
Ancient Egypt definitely defined a lot of supernatural things, but ancient Egypt ideas didn't come from just Africa. Like in Southern Africa, African ideas, the Hazite people, or Hazara, and the San people, they have some of the oldest DNA, and they have the San people have more mythology, especially about the Milky Way, and the Hazara have more limited mythology, almost no religion. And But they have some very interesting things, especially speaking about Venus figurines. The Hazadi people, the women make a mud baby. It's like when a woman's going to be pregnant and have a baby, the elder women go to like the riverside or whatever, or lake or water of some kind, and they get mud and they make like a life-size almost baby.
Mhm.
And they don't think it's the baby. They don't think it's the spirit coming into the baby. They think it's like its own pseudo spirit being, sort of, which I think that also relates to what I just taking that ethnographically understanding, in other words, like normal cultures we have understanding of, and placing that what the Venus figurines could relate to. Because since the Hazai are making like a pseudo or a figurine that is human-like, and then saying it's not a human, it's not an ancestor, it's like its own being, and but it still relates to like the clan and everything else. So I see that. That's why I see the Venus figurines as probably not deities, probably not specifically a person. You know what I'm saying? Like not like, you know, not Damien or, you know, whatever. Not a
Yeah.
well, just what I'm saying, you know, just making a point. Just
Yeah, I
like the
get what you're saying.
Hazada, when they create the mud baby, you know, they're not creating this or representing a spirit or an ancestor. It's its own thing, but it is a spirit in a sense. So, but that I think like the mythology in general is kind of hard for us to grasp because we want it to be a simple answer. So when that you said before, when it's the father, it's the son, it's the brother, we're like, well, wait a minute. How can it
Yeah.
be all that? Well, that's because our
Yeah.
limitations are being placed on their understanding didn't have to make sense to us.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because Enigma, I know him from X also. He's very vocal about what he says. He has a personality, I'll just put it that way. But he says Jesus is not Odin. These are superficial symbolic correlations. The historical context is completely different. No atheist scholar at my university would ever say that these are superficial ideas. So, you know,
Well,
the
just
reason
to
why I said
answer, I never said that Jesus was Odin. These
no,
are
that's what
living and
he's talking
these
about.
are
What he's
living and
talking about.
dying gods. And I was agreeing with you, you know, that they absolutely are in the same category of ideas. But, you know, I when did you think that either of us said they were the same?
Well, yeah. He it's because I said that their stories are the way their life ended or not ended. Well, depends on how you look at it. Kind of was. So what I like to do is I like ChatGPT a lot because I am not an artist in any way, but I can explain my thoughts where people can understand. That's what a lot of people say that I'm really good at. So what I like to do is I like to dictate to to my programs. Say, hey, look, this is what I believe. This is what I've read. Right. Not what I believe so much, but this is what I've read. I read this from this book. These are the details that and then I asked ChatGPT, take these details in this paragraph or sentence or whatever and create a picture scenario for me. And I'll tweak it until it's what I wasn't imagining. So of course I was reading a lot. I just got done reading this book for the second time, The Hooked X by Scott Walter. I don't know if you know who Scott Walter is. But I actually have an autograph copy from him. So he actually signed it for me. So I just got done reading his book for the second time. And the reason why I was reading his book was because, you know, X marks the spot. At least that's what I've learned from reading, you know, Strong's Concordance, learning from Jeff Benner. I actually had a discussion with Jeff Benner. And I don't know if you know who that is, but he's an ancient Hebrew scholar, and he's very knowledgeable on ancient Hebrew texts and Aramaic and so on and so forth. and the religion and the Bible and so on and so forth. And I learned through him that X marks the spot. And I when I read this book right here, I couldn't help but like think about everything that you said. Like you talked about Venus. He talks about Venus in this book. Well, we know that Venus was also Ishtar in Mesopotamia, or Inanna, and then if you look around the world and type that in, you'll see which god she could have been across the world, right? And when it comes to people, when they say that they weren't the same, I don't think they were the exact same people either. I think a lot of the times, a lot of this stuff is based off of, how can I say, just similarities, right? Like there's no, they're not the same exact thing or anything like that. There's just similarities. So right here, of course, I posted this just 18 hours ago. And this is what I was saying. I posted this 18 hours ago. I said, what you're seeing symbolically is a coincidence of motives between Odin and Jesus, not an assertion that the traditions are the same. In both stories, a figure hangs between heaven and earth. Pierced by a spear, bound to a tree cross, the wound marks transformation, because that was the transformation. That's what I've read through all the texts that I've read. The suspension marks a liminal state between life and death. Across cultures, sacrifice becomes a way humans explain wisdom, redemption, and rebirth using shared symbolic language. Now, what's interesting to me is when it comes up to this third eye, when you talk about, shamanism and stuff like that, I've read where people said that Jesus was a shaman too. He went away, he traveled, he was in, not two shamans are the same, so they're always all, they all have their way of doing things. But some people I have read said that they were that Jesus was the same. What do you think about that? Do you agree with that, or do you have different ideas?
Shaman? Well, can you share the thing I just sent you? This is from shamanism, and it's for the website's called Norse Mythology for Smart People. And
where did you share that?
I shared at the end. It's white writing.
Okay, yeah, I got you.
You can go to the website if you want to. I just gave you the thing, but it's called Shamanism, Norse Shamanism, or Norse Mythology for Smart People, Shamanism. And it talks about Odin being a shaman and stuff, and how shamanism relates to this. But yeah, and then also, if you go to the Wikipedia, I said it wrong. I said living and dying gods. I was wrong. It's dying and rising god. That's a type of deity. That you are correct. And it's not that one. That was the symbols all across the world. And I show the different numbers showing which symbols are at which areas. But just showing there's more connection than people think. People think like everything's all disconnected. I know multiple ways that that's inaccurate.
And I'm glad.
Mythology is connected. DNA is connected. I mean, yeah, it's all kinds of stuff.
So this is perfect. This is a perfect opportunity. One of the serious conversations that we had, when I say serious conversations, is that we was just giving out sources to each other. We was talking about the Olmecs. Now, one thing that I can say is I don't know where the Olmecs came from. I just know that they say that not the culture, but the helmets and the braids came around that area. So that's what they say. Now, one of my questions always was, and I was saving this because we was going to continue this conversation on live, is that I feel like I even have a map behind me, so I look at it all the time. I always wonder, why do people think that everything came from Africa? Because I understand that Homo sapiens. So when I hear Homo sapiens, people will say 200,000 years ago. Well, there was like a peer-reviewed article that came out in 2012, I want to say, that said that the oldest Homo sapien bones came from Morocco, Africa.
That's correct.
They say, yeah, that's
so
what
here, speaking of that, I'll give you something you can show. This is DNA. This is from a research article. DNA showing that we started in North Africa, then we went to, in a sense, Central West Africa, then we went to South Africa, then we went to East Africa, and then the red part is mixing both Africa and the Middle East. Do you see it? And it says which DNA.
Okay, yeah,
there you go.
Right here.
This is from a research. It's not my art. This is a research article. And when it says MT, I know they should explain this better, but MT is female DNA, and the DNA type or haplogroup is female L. And then it says Y, that's male. And then the male DNA was AOA1. And that was, in a sense, 320,000 years ago in Morocco, that in that, little yellow area. Then 300,000 years ago, not that those people, listeners, people understand too, not that doesn't mean that everyone left and there was nobody in North Africa. It also doesn't mean there was no one that, I'm just making a comment. Because I'm trying to help people understand. So some people could have left, right? But some people, I should say, some people did leave. Some people might have stayed. So the ones that left was still L haplogroup female, but now it was YAOO for male, the one that left. Then they went down, and that was 300,000. Then they were down in southern and sort of central southern Africa. As you see, it's a green area is pretty large. And this time, though, the female DNA is L1 and the male DNA is B, right? But also, there's two different kinds. There also was female DNA LO and then male DNA A1. So this area had both male A1 and B. So it had two different male DNAs now. Before it was just A's, and now it's A and B. And then that moves 230 to, in a sense, East Africa, where a lot of people say this is a problem is a lot of people will read when an archaeologist or a DNA says the last common ancestor. Yeah, not the first, the last. So we have a lot of common ancestors. This explains that. But there's a difference between the first, the last, the middle common ancestor. So generally, the reason why a lot of times, that's what makes it confusing. Even though we come from North Africa, not everybody, in a sense, has a last common ancestor in North Africa. In fact, most people don't. Most people's last common ancestor, male, would come from East Africa. Last common ancestor, female, comes from South Africa, which also makes it confusing because then there's two places and people are like, well, is it South Africa or is it? Well, it depends on what you're saying. If you say, I'll show another picture. This is from an article, not mine. This is saying everyone comes from South Africa, but they should say female because otherwise it gets confusing. But that's the problem is that you see here, it doesn't even say, it just says population. It doesn't even say what DNA. It doesn't say that this is only female. But as you saw before, 230 male DNA also was there, and they did go to East Africa. So a lot of this stuff, the problem is, this is like not a research. This is like just like a news article for archaeology or for DNA. So it's not wrong. Yes, that's where people come from at a certain point. That doesn't mean that's really the only place or the first place that people came from, which is why it becomes extremely difficult to understand. Even more so, people left Africa, okay? Like I know you had shared stuff before about E. E actually left Africa before E, comes back to Africa, and then becomes E, which I'll show you that also. I have a picture of, all this stuff makes it very complicated to understand. Like here, I'll show you this one. This is from the research article of the first one of the DNAs. This shows that you notice the yellow is still in the Middle East, but yet it's also still in Africa. This is also why I say animism started in Africa, even though I could literally say the culture that started animism probably relates to both the Middle East and Africa, but because people don't even grasp this stuff, I try to simplify. Just like that one picture before tried to simplify, people come from South Africa. Well, the female line does. And so this shows that people left, right? It says what male DNA is CDF, and 85 to 75,000 years ago, they come down. This is important too about this yellow, because agriculture, when people think like when did we first start gathering stuff? Well, this is almost Iran, the edge of the yellow by the water. And over in Iran, by 80,000, they started gathering stuff. But it's still really an African culture. Do you see what I'm saying? If most of the culture is in Africa, is it truly right to say it's a completely Middle Eastern culture? It makes it confusing. But as you see, more of the culture, because those ideas go right back, and then certainly by 40,000 or so, they're doing sort of agriculture stuff on the Nile Valley, because this is all part of the similar stuff going on. But in the Balkans, which is like Greece and stuff, Bulgaria, they get agriculture like the oat. They get which is already hulled oat, meaning it already evolved. It's already semi-domesticated. They get it like 35,000. But it's still really a Middle East and African people and culture. You see what I'm saying? So they both didn't leave and did leave. Probably went back and forth in a sense. But once the cold happens, people go south, and then they go, even some, not all, some go all the way to South Africa, and then they come. That's when, in 70,000 years ago, they make a stone snake and have burials, which they also had burials in Central Africa. But it's really similar people sharing similar ideas. So I'll show you another one. The more it helps explain E. Let me find that.
No, why are you doing that? Yeah, it's the thing for me is just they say the oldest Homo sapien bones comes from Morocco, Africa. And then a lot of people say the Homo sapiens comes from 200,000 years ago, but the 200,000-year-old Homo sapiens are not the same ones from 75,000 years ago, and are not the same from 20,000 years ago. But they're all classified as Homo sapiens. You could tell by their bone structures actually being different in different places and stuff like that. I'm
not disagreeing with that. I'm saying the reason that is they are really related. See, here's haplogroup B, and everything in the pink, in a sense, is out of Africa. And so the people both went out and then they went back in. So, but like I said, that doesn't mean they were ever a non-African thing, because the first people that went out at 120 to 80,000, they come out and then they come back. Well, when they come back to Africa, so then once again, in East Africa, our last common ancestor for everybody outside is CT, which does relate to E. But CT used to be outside and came back. But the culture itself, see, like I said, why it's confusing, never totally left Africa. So it's also true that culture was always in Africa. It was always in Africa, but started to go in the Middle East, then left the Middle East, stayed in Africa, but then went back out again. When it went back out again, that relates to all humans that are outside of Africa. So, and I do agree with you, the faces do change because people are evolving, time is evolving. And I don't think that just moving, 300 miles or so out of Africa is going to change you as a person, right? So Africans leave, Africans come back, as far as I'm concerned, right? I'm just saying if you understand sort of the DNA, in other words, they didn't become Middle Easterns. They weren't Europeans. Africans left, Africans come back, and then our last common ancestor, Africans, then leave again, go to India, right? Become F and all these other ones. What did it say? The Gulf of Aden. Yeah.
The Gulf of Aden is being challenged with the Egypt route. Arabia would have been a very hostile to cross.
Yeah, but to understand is a long time ago, if you 70,000, 60,000 years ago, this area is not the same. In fact, but it also is mountains if you go the other way. But so here's a DNA thing of females, and it shows going both ways. So I think that I just sent it to you.
Yep.
This is just female DNA, by the way. See, it has L, is it L, and it shows it in southern, and then it splits, right? It says when, then some goes one way, N, and then M goes another way, and they almost meet together in a sense after they leave Africa. But come on, do you really think that just because you left Africa, it makes you a non-African? I mean, they don't have time to evolve that much different from where they left, 57,000 and then 45 and 60. This is not, there's not, in other words, what I'm trying to say is some people act like just because you leave the African continent, everything changes. That's fantasy land. I used to say, I don't see it that way. I don't think the DNA would express itself that way. Just like how ddNA, which I'll show you a thing of that, ddNA, because A, B, C, D, right? So D is older than E. And ddNA goes all the way to, in a sense, India and to, southern, Japan. And I believe that it would have stayed African in a sense. Everyone would have, nobody evolved yet. At the times that they're getting there when it's almost just the same as everybody is already in Africa. In other words, people have this opinion that somehow you change immediately, and just because it takes a long time for changes, and then also people don't realize humans choose humans, right? It's not like animals where just random whoever's around you have sex with. Humans look at it and go, I like this better or that better, or these features, like say light skin, which comes much later. But light skin, the reason you're choosing it is maybe because they're healthy in a sense in a low sun environment. So you're not choosing it because you're racist at that point or whatever, or because because people just all turn this. It's sexual selection. We go, ooh, I find that attractive or not attractive. And also think of this. If someone was different, some people could say that person is bad, let's get rid of them, right? But also it could be that person is different and then I want that more. So cultures are different in that way. But I'm just making a comment that you can see that these people, all the way to the Philippines area, which the D is all over, are they call them negritos because they're black skin, but actually they're Asians in a sense. But when you understand that we all come from Africa, going back to what you said, we all do. That's also why I really am against people that talk about Atlantis, especially that say that Atlantis is white people and that they were never Africans. I'm like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Everyone was from Africa, everybody. And there was no magical white race that happened, that were somehow not African. I mean, that is just absolute false. Anyways, so, and I'll show you a thing about white skin I have real quick.
I'm glad you brought that up because while you're doing that, I actually had a podcast discussion where Dr. Keith Chang, and he's actually the founder of SLC 2485. He's actually the founder of that. And what he was trying to do was he found that gene, and he explains it in the podcast discussion. It's on my YouTube channel. That he was looking for it because he was trying to find a cure for cancer.
No.
And he goes into this whole idea of how he's managing how to do that. And at this moment, at this time, it used to be funded by the university, but then they lost funds to it, and now he does it out of his own pocket. So this is something that he was actually like one of the first people that I had a podcast discussion with. He was actually I know for a fact the first person that I asked, and he just answered like a couple of months later. But he actually gives out where the white skin came from.
Right.
Just a little background. I'm mixed. My father's African American, but when I did my DNA test, I found out we mostly come from Nigeria, from that area on that side. Small places around there. And then my mom is German and Turkish. So when you mentioned Turkey earlier, you know, I was like, yeah, we were going to have a good discussion because my mom is actually Turkish. And when you talk about DNA and haplogroups and stuff like that, I actually did my own DNA test on 23andMe. I think that's what it's called. My mom, even though she's German and Turkish, her oldest haplogroup comes from South Africa. And that's what's very interesting because you know, a lot of people say, well, we all come from Africa. And I know that, there's different ideas about that. A lot of people will say, as much as there's out of theory discussions, there's inner Africa theory discussions too. And the reason why is because you're right. People left Africa and then they eventually made their way back. They might have left Africa, but they definitely took their culture with them, right? Like if you cook a certain food here with certain types of seasoning and styles, and you find that it's almost an identical type of meat or identical type of meat somewhere else, you're going to carry that forward. It just makes sense that way, right? Yeah, you might be limited to certain seasonings and certain things, so you might replace this style with that style instead, or this with that. And that's how things change off, is because you only are able to use the supplies that you have on hand, right? Especially if you're hunting and gathering and you're going somewhere else, right? You use what you have on hand. And just looking at my parents every single day, one of the questions I've always had was, where did the black skin come from? Where did the white skin come from? Because I grew up in the 80s, and there was a lot of crazy things that were still being promoted back then about black skin and white skin.
Right.
And, a lot of racism still, and, all this other stuff. And, you see it in the TV shows, the movies, the news. You read it in the books. It's always in our faces. So I always wanted to know, well, where did the white skin come from? Where did the black skin come from? They always say, I go to school and the teachers will say, the closer we were to Africa, the darker the skin. And then they would say we all, the first humans, or the idea of first humans came from Africa. But then you think about the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and you think about all the species before that. So let me ask you, because we keep talking about humans. What is the criteria needed to be a human? Because we all have the idea that you have to have a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, hands, feet, torso, right? And a brain.
Well, actually, to answer your question simply, if you're a homo, you're a human. So all homo is human, just to make it simple. They all are. So Homo erectus is human. In fact, our ancestor is Homo erectus. Here's a picture of my art that explains. And Denisovans and Neanderthal are from Homo erectus, just like us. And they all went through Spain. So what happened is the Homo erectus one of the main, because it went different places, but one of them was basically East Africa, and the pink just shows our lineage. So Homo erectus goes to North Africa, and then our last common ancestor, you see that little circle, and the common ancestor is the common ancestor that later became human, and then also went into Spain and later became Neanderthals and Denisovans. All of us are related. And so our last common ancestor from Homo erectus was 750 to 550,000 years ago in North Africa. So in other words, the ancestor of Neanderthal and Denisovan and humans, in a sense, modern humans, are all from North Africa. So we're all from Africa. So anybody who thinks somehow, especially the white racists, that think that because they might have Neanderthal DNA that somehow they're not from Africa, wrong. Everyone's from Africa. All the people that are humans, all the Homo lineage, are from Africa. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you go back to maybe this is at 3 million. You go back 30 million years ago. There was an ancestor, I think, of a sort of monkey or something that lived in Europe, but that's ridiculous. That's not even that's an animal that's nothing to do with human lineage.
Mm-hmm.
All Homo, which is that pink circle, is from Africa, and the Desovians and the Neanderthal are from Africa. They're ancestors. Mm-hmm. So this is pre them, just like it's pre us. Humans, that little purple dot, whatever, Homo sapiens, we're only 350 or so. So the 700 and 550 is a older ancestor, but it's still that older ancestor was from Africa. So
right.
Yeah, you get what I'm saying. And then up in Spain at 473 to 381 is the common ancestor of Neanderthal and Denisovans. That they split there, and then Denisovans go all the way to Asia. Eventually, Neanderthals do the same thing, and just like later cultures come the opposite way from Siberia into Europe, is because there's a steppe there. It's an easy travel.
No, like that's interesting. No, I get what you're saying, bro. Like it's amazing what you're saying, because look, I always ask this question because, like you said the Neanderthals and the Denisovans, they came from Homo erectus, right?
Correct. And so did we.
Okay, so this is what's interesting to me. So a lot of people know about the Cro-Magnon people, right? You know, this is where I want to ask your question and your opinion on. I know about the Cro-Magnon people, and I looked at the DNA and the lineages and all that other stuff, and it seems to say that it came from Africa. That's where they say that they originated from Africa. Okay, like that's somewhere in that pinkish area on the top, somewhere in that area, they came from Africa.
Well, they would have come from the little burgundy where it says Homo sapien, that little dot. Homo sapiens just a little bit down. But yes, it came from North Africa, absolutely. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and show you. First off, I never use, and it's not common now to use the term Cro-Magnon. Cro-Magnon is basically linking together the Orconation culture, the pre-Orconation culture, and also linking in the Gravitan culture, and also linking in the Magdalenian culture. It's linking in several cultures that all had different DNA a little bit. But so I have a thing that shows how the first Europeans, when the first Europeans is what most, especially racists, are talking about when they say that they have Cro-Magnon. See where it's the pink? That's the Orconation culture. And they had multiple DNA. So once again, it's not just one. They had C1A. Well, if you look down, C is over in almost Iran. Well, it comes from CF, and CF comes from CT, which was from Africa.
Yeah.
So
that's what. Not... Yeah. That's what I say too. Is that I always tell them, I said, stop looking at the haplogroup that makes you feel comfortable. What came before that haplogroup?
Right. Exactly.
And then where that one came from.
Exactly.
Because that would tell you that, and then if they really cared about knowing their lineage and their time frame, that would give them an idea of how the haplogroups change. Because let me ask you, I don't understand how they distinguish one haplogroup from another. So what are some of the I've read so many different ideas and theories, but there's nothing that's conclusive to me that I could say, yeah, I believe that 100%. But like when it goes from CF to C?
Simpler. So you're asking about differences, right? So the real truth is right here. Okay, 99.9% of all human DNA is identical. So. Because we're all from Africa, first off, but like we already talked about. So, and that includes Cro-Magnons. Cro-Magnons are not this special non-African white race. In fact, Cro-Magnons were not white. The next culture, even after them, the Western hunter-gatherers, which was not Cro-Magnon, because but even they were not white. In fact, they have 9,000-year-old Europeans that were dark-skinned, blue-eyed sometimes, but dark-skinned. And then since the population of white taking over Europe and making it white happened fully by 3,000 years ago. So not very long ago. It was, in a sense, an invasion. In fact, 90% of people that were in Ireland were killed off or not allowed to reproduce because, who knows exactly what happened to those people. And 90 or 80% of England was basically all the hunter-gatherers that were dark-skinned, gone. Mm-hmm. So it became white afterwards. And then the same thing happened with Spain. It's about 90% of the dark-skinned people were, in a sense, taken over. I'll show you the thing. With new cultures. But that doesn't mean that everyone was white there all the time. It means that they weren't white. That's what I did. Racist. Like, dude, what do you? Europe used to be all dark people. So I don't know what you're fucking talking about.
It's funny you say that because the reason why I brought up the Cro-Magnon is because now the proper term that's no longer the proper term for it. The proper term is early or European early modern humans, and that's where we get the from.
I agree.
So that's what that's the new term is. But see, when people say I'm European, so in my knowledgeable mind that I have, the information that's in my head, I hear they're early Magnon people. So they're the first people from Africa.
Right.
So that makes you an African.
Yeah. That's more accurate than to think they were white people. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because they would have been still dark. They would have been Africans in Europe, not white people. So this right here, this map,
you're the people who migrated to Europe. You can trace your people to who were the first people in Europe. That should be more of an honor to have than saying, well, I'm white and I'm Cro-Magnon, because when you say that, those two things don't add up to each other.
Well, anyways, Cro-Magnons were cDNA, were kDNA, and were male. I'm talking about. And the majority of Europeans have nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
See where it says here? Well, go back to the first one you just had.
Yeah.
Yeah, going back to Cro-Magnon. So Organation is the first culture of Europe. Okay.
Organation.
So if your DNA nowadays doesn't match this, the either C1A, C1B, or K2A. So some people say they have F2, but it doesn't matter. Nowadays, Europeans are none of these. The majority are R1B or R1A, right? Yeah. Which is not this. So you're not a descendant of Cro-Magnon unless you are that DNA, which they're not. Yeah. So they're not. They are invaders or whatever, or people that repopulated afterwards. They have nothing to do. In other words, there's no genetic cultural connection to the Cro-Magnons. That is absolute fantasy land. And then the female DNA is like this. Is what one of the racists I talked to, he goes, "Oh well, you, which is female, you was there. Okay, so there was some you that's still there. You actually is connected. U5 specifically is that first shaman with the damaged eye that I showed you, holding the fox, is UDNA. And UDNA probably, because it's also way up here in Balta culture in Siberia, probably came when C1 came down with shamanism and brought. But some people think UDNA came up and met them. Anyways, UDNA at that place where it says, Czechoslovakia, 31,000 to 25,000 years ago. So this DNA up in here is C1 again. So not Europeans today. And that they had the burial of the first U5, which was the shaman with the damaged eye. So, but as you notice, they came from way over in Siberia. So they themselves are more like the third generation or fourth generation of Europeans, but still not the ones that live there today.
Yeah.
And I know, like I said, like you see by the map, I tried to be very diligent to figure out who did what, when, where, because it's not simple. So that's why, to me, when they use simple things, oh, it's just this. Let's go to the next picture. So this is older. Then there's the younger one, which is still not white people. So where it says WHG, it's in orange, the little orange dots that show England and France and Italy and the Balkans. These people right here are all dark skinned, probably with blue eyes. Then the ones, and by the way, too, the ones down where it says IHG down in Spain, they have some of the orange, so it shows there's some mixing, so they're not pure either. But these people would have been even darker. Mm-hmm. Then if you go to where it says Eastern Hunter-Gatherers, which is EHJ in red, the red dots, these are the first white people coming in from Siberia. Then the people that SHG, which is in a sense the Scandinavian hunter-gatherers, these people do have some orange. So some of the people are still dark skinned because the orange is the dark skin, blue eyes. And then but also has some red. You see, like it shows the portions, the little portions. So it has some red, and red are the first white people in a sense. So even Scandinavia, Sweden or whatever, they're not all white yet. They have both some dark-skinned people and some light-skinned people. They have a mix where, since Russia, Ukraine, these people are more white people. But even then, if you look at the little dots, some of them have some of the orange in them. So some of them have some dark people with the blue eyes, DNA. So there's no pure, even white people, even at the beginning when it was starting to move around.
I think you'll like that conversation I had with Dr. Keith Chang with SLC 2485, because I mean, it was like one of my first podcast discussions. I didn't know if I was going to do video or podcast, and we just had a normal podcast discussion. And I asked him some questions that I had, and he talks about, I've read articles where they said anywhere from 6,000 years ago to 20,000 years ago, according to his stuff, about what is considered the white gene and where it possibly came from. Yeah. They don't know for sure, but he definitely says it comes from somebody who came from Africa. And the way they can test that is because they said that there's certain, I can't remember because I haven't watched it in a long time, but there's certain patterns in the DNA that can only come from Africa. Like it was only certain patterns, because like I said, he was looking at trying to find a cure for skin cancer. And he wanted to know why, darker skinned people were able to be in the sun much longer without being affected as easier as the white skin. And it was very interesting how he explains it, because he explains it to the T, like he's a PhD geneticist type individual up there in the field, explaining it to me that, and I don't even have a college degree. So he explained it to me where I can understand it. And basically he was just saying that what he found it through, okay, so there's this fish out there called the zebrafish, and they have this same kind of genetic makeup that we have, not genetic makeup, but like genes in them that we have. And they can do certain things with their body that we were able to see in our DNA. So he looked at that, and then he started relating that to certain gene, how can I say, I can't remember the word, but certain parts of the DNA to skin, and then relating it to how it started with skin cancer and how it could deplete the skin to create skin cancer and so on and so forth. And basically, he could tell by the way that this DNA, how the skin, they can test the I guess when they test for cancer, it's a certain blood thing or certain thing that pops up that they can tell that, okay, that's cancer in your body right there. It's an extensive test, I guess they do. And they found that doing, through certain periods of, just people that they found through people throughout, through archaeological digs and stuff. So he was able to pinpoint his research through that. And he said one of his best parts was that he was doing some kind of test, and he went to one of his coworkers and asked him a question. And I'm not trying to give too much away because I want people to actually go watch the video. It's called SLC 2485. It's a very
Right. If you
interesting.
look at the top of the map that I sent you, it shows where that comes from. But actually, the Eastern hunter gatherers have SLC 4A5, but they also have SLC 4. I can't hard to read now.
4582.
45A2. But actually, those are just the major ones that have to do with European skin, because where it see the light purple where it says N1C, those people, they have light skin, but those people have an Asian version of light skin, not the European. So Scandinavia has light skin from both Asia and the European versions. So
I've read so many different articles and like a lot of what he said wasn't just a lot of what I said wasn't just from him. It came from so many different sources. It led me up to him. And that's why I asked him certain questions in that interview. I still really don't understand how haplogroups work, because I really don't understand how they determine how it can go from like, E1B1A to E1B1B. I understand. I kind of get it, but I don't understand.
It's like family. It's like saying your grandfather, your grandfather's grandfather, and they can tell because there's little variations in the thing, and in the DNA. And then when there's a large, in a sense, mutation or variation, that's a new haplogroup. And then
I'm glad.
But going back to what you're saying, these alleles, which are things inside, are not haplogroups. The SLC this has nothing to do with haplogroups. They're a separate thing. They're like or they stop or slow melanin. So that's what white skin is, just melanin skin that's losing its melanin in a sense. So, but this map I have right here shows the different haplogroups areas. Like, see where it says mtDNA R1. That's who the haplogroup that carried the SLC 24A5, and probably where it says MT down near the Cossack Mountains 13,000 years ago. It says MT and it says R1A. So there's R1 and there's R1A. And if you notice, the Eastern hunter-gatherers are R1B. So it's the haplogroup, like different family members. Like the one is the grandmother, because this is female. The grandmother starts in Siberia, sometime 18 to 24,000 or maybe 30,000 before, because it could just been R, because R1 is a sibling or right. So it started probably R, because the reason we know that is R, not R1, just regular R, went from Siberia down into China and had SLC 24A5. That DNA shows up about 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, and that is in the Tarim Basin mummies, why they kind of look white or European. They're actually Siberian, but they're R. Then R1 moved, R stayed probably, obviously, because it went to China much younger, 6,000 to 8,000. Because R leaves about 13 to 14,000, shows up in the Cossack Mountains 13,000 years ago, shows up in Estonia or somewhere near the Baltic at 13,000. But before it got there, a branch jumped off and goes into Scandinavia and gets there 9,000. And these are showing, but also the people from the Cossack Mountains go down into Turkey, which they took them SLC 245A, but also they get SLC 5A2, but they got that 10,000 years ago from the Y-DNA R2, bringing it from Siberia down through the Kazakhstan into Iran and then up into Turkey. And then those people with two different alleles for light skin, in a sense, these are the ancient farmers or whatever that go into Europe. So they go into Europe and start spreading some light skin at 9,000 at least. This is trying to explain like where they come from. So the same thing, like the northern part is Q DNA, the male, and also R. So Q and R, which I have a thing that shows that the DNAs of the ancient North Eurasians is what this is talking about. But our skin, when R first left, the male I'm talking about, there was no light skin, or it was very, very little, in a sense, more like just look black or dark at least.
Mm.
So a lot of people like, well, we had R come to the Middle East 22,000 years ago. Yeah, well, they were darker than Hispanic people, so they're still very dark. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not the great white hope that these racists want it to be. I'm like, no, it didn't happen that way. Sorry. Mm-mm.
You know, it's just for me, it's important when people debate me or try to tell me something. It's like, look, you got to look at the sources, and
Right.
you got to be able to change your idea based on those sources. Like somebody says, hey, look, this comes from here, and you didn't know that, you can still be right. You just didn't know the most earliest form, and that's okay.
Right.
You know, you're not wrong in the sense of you know, the information. You're just wrong as far as what you consider the earliest. Like if you're saying, you know, like Robert Seffer always talks about the Cro-Magnon so much, and I'm like, yo, bro, did you know that these people literally came from Africa? Like you can look at the DNA. He'll point at one haplogroup or gene, and I said, well, what came before that? And then what came before that? And then I asked, but he actually blocked me because I asked him, I said, what came before that and what came before that? And then when you see that, how long does it take for you to change? And I told him about SLC 2485. And I told him that
I showed him a map of that too. And he goes like, I don't want to see your maps. I'm like, yeah, all this is this stuff you can go look up. All of this is factual. I mean,
yeah.
I find him to be just a racist. I mean, he already knows different, and he promotes that white people came from somewhere else, and that's just wrong.
You know, I never understood, like, okay, if you want the truth, you'll look at the truth. And
he doesn't want the truth.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's easier to give people to people that have, you know, crazy ideologies and stuff like that. It's easier for them to promote somebody that has that same type of crazy ideology because they don't want to, you know, put themselves out there like that. You know, I was always the type of person to say, okay, look, I don't know everything, but I can tell you that it might seem that way because I'm always talking about different subjects. It's just something, it's just a hobby of mine. This is a passion of mine. It's just, if somebody says something and I think a lot of people believe it, I'm going to dig into it. It's like my when somebody's trending about something like UFOs, I'll go read a whole bunch of books about UFOs. I mean, I've read books from all kinds of people from UFOs. I've actually corrected a lot of sources on a lot of these people who try to correlate and say that the ancient mythologies, it said this and this is what they meant about UFOs. And I was like, yo, that's not what they meant. And I can tell you exactly why they didn't mean that, because this is, first of all, the dating is wrong. And two, there's no actual source for that. And, you know, I'm a source kind of a person, and I'm not saying that I believe every peer-reviewed article. I don't believe every book and this and that. What I'm saying is that I read it and I gather the information and I do my own research from that, meaning that I have to sometimes use Google Earth to see how they traveled somewhere. Would it make sense to travel this way in the first place, or wouldn't it have? You know, people back then didn't have the technology we had, so it'll be easy to decide whether they just made up some shit. Why in the hell would somebody travel over a big ass mountain like the Himalayas just to get onto the other side of the world? It's something like that, an example like that. So I use what people like when somebody puts a route on something, I look at it and say, okay, what is close in this area? And I give it, of course, give or take some mileage, of course, because of the simple fact that just giving you it could be a small little entryway, right? And that could be a perfect example to help stuff. But what I'm talking about, what I'm basically saying is, I do my due diligence. If somebody says something, I want to know everything about it. And if you're so pressed about being right about everything, I feel like this social media crap got into a lot of people's heads, because right now everybody's trying to monetize their shit and get paid for it. And then they don't ever answer the questions that people challenge them. They'll talk to people who agree with them, and that's it. But when somebody challenges them, they don't have time for that. I'm the opposite. I'd rather you challenge me in the comment section and tell me I'm wrong, so that way we can have a better discussion, because I want to learn from you now, because you're telling me I'm wrong about something. I never gave you my opinion, because everything that I share on my thing, except the new thing that I'm starting to do with my commentary about what is wrong about certain texts and stuff like that. And I just started that like a few days ago. But everything that I shared up until that point, what I did was I make to the point that, okay, look, this is what I've read. Okay. And even my commentary is based off of what I've read, because when these people put their little bibliographies in the back and say they got this source from here, I go to it and see if I have that same source in my library, or if I can grab it and read it real quick. And in most cases, a lot of people don't even understand this. You can tell when somebody's faking a quote or making up a quote, because nowadays everything's digital. So you can go to the digital copy online, type in hit control F on your computer, or look for a finding page on your phone or whatever, type in that sentence that person said, or a few words of what that person said, and say finding page, or go search it, and it'll bring it up, and you can see how they change certain words. Like I've seen that in books. That's what made me start what I've learned from reading these books, is because a lot of people will say this person said this in this book, and I'm like, yo, I'm gonna go find it and see if they said it. And I find out that they changed a whole bunch of words to fit their narrative. A lot of people want their own narrative to be spoken, and that's the crazy thing. First of all, we are never going to find out where the first people actually came from. Only right now, science says that we came from Africa. There's no science that says we came from anywhere else. And the reason why I say that,
I agree. That's why Robert Seffer's saying that that white people come from Atlantis. Or Cro-Magnons are white. That both those are wrong.
But it's so funny, because Enigma said earlier that Atlanteans were brown. Plato made it pretty clear they weren't Europeans, but people glanced over that detail. He did say elephants. So I asked him, I said, which detail? And he says elephants and no rain. So let me ask you, with elephants, he says the word elephants, that could mean anything, because we had mammoths before we had elephants, right? So a word for mammoths.
Well, yeah, they both relate to the same thing. And right. Go ahead and show the next picture that I have. This is showing the cultures. So ancient North Eurasians is the white circle, but inside that there's different haplogroups. There's R1A, R1B, R2, and Q DNA that goes to the Americas. So the culture the culture goes down to the Anu in Japan. But so at least, and especially these are also spreading different ideas, but most of them come from a central source of ideas. So that's why, to me, a lot of the world's religions have some similarity to Africa, have similarity to the Middle East, and have similarity right here to the ancient North Eurasians, because their DNA and ideas and skin color or whatever goes all over the place. But they weren't the same people. Mm-hmm. They have different haplogroups, meaning they're different, lineages or whatever. And the red is Q, what's his name? Not Robert Seffer, but Graham Hancock. He had posted a thing that R1B, which is the purple. See the purple goes down, becomes the Western hunter-gatherers. That's R1B. The pinkish one that goes to Eastern hunter-gatherers, HG, that's R1A at first mainly. It has some R1B, but mainly it's R1A. And then the white goes down to Iran, that's R2. So it's like you said, science. Science knows the difference of what these things are. He said the purple R1B which is now a lot in Europe, he said they went to the Americas. Well, I know for a fact that did not happen. And then he says that they were white. Well, if that did happen at 24,000 years ago, that was pre-white people. They would have not been white. So even if they did go over, it doesn't help him with the white skin, because white skin, as I showed you in the map before, doesn't go that way. It goes the other way. And then the people that eventually end up as northern Native Americans much later, like 6,000 to 1,000, those people had Asian light skin, not European. So, which I always think is interesting too. Racists say white skin, but that's a lie, because a lot of Asians have white skin. So then they go, oh, but their eyes. And I'm like, so then it's not about skin. You just mean Europeanness, really. It goes to even like you said before. And then what's a European? If you say an original European, that'd be a dark-skinned person of C1 or K, or even F DNA. The haplogroup.
Yeah, see, that's the only thing that doesn't get me, is that their argument is not off of science. Oh, and I know a lot of them was saying, well, I don't trust the science. I don't trust the science. So I know for a fact, 100% there are racist scientists out there. I know for a fact 100% is out there. Why aren't they presenting the science to back up their claim then? This is what doesn't get me. But that's what I'm saying. That's what it comes into debates, is that if you're going to tell me I'm wrong about something, just show me something that I can read that says it. Don't go off of what your theory is, because once I ask you questions, you can't get mad at the amount of questions that I have. That's the stupidest thing that I hear people do, is you ask too many questions. You want to know, you want to know too much. No, I just want to know what the facts are. If you tell me that you are calling them Europeans, in my educated mind, knowledgeable mind, I hear Cro-Magnon people, which were early Africans, right? And now the new word for Cro-Magnon is not even that anymore. It's European early modern humans. So just with those 4 words, that means that there were modern humans before European.
Yeah, that's correct.
So how did those European early modern humans get there? Well, they came from somewhere else.
In Africa.
So
they went from Africa to probably Iran, India area, Pakistan. Then they went to the Middle East, and then they went to Europe. But this map right here shows the little dots on the second one, and then the last one. So the top one relates to the DNA dots on the second one. And then the next one about Asia relates to the one below it. So it's 2 different maps doing 2 different times. One is 24,000 to about maybe 9,000 or so. And the other one is about 8,000, 9,000 down until, I think it's 4,000. So, but it's showing the relatedness. Like, if it's darker orange, like on the second map thing, darker orange means more connection. So more connection is QDNA. More connection is really in the Americas, and not so much even where it came from, because the people left. And then the second one, which is also Lake Baikal, and all these arrows is because people were moving all the fuck around places. I know it looks like a total clusterfuck. It's the first one is a lot simpler. It's like 1, 2 cultures, 3 cultures, and then it goes over. Then the second one looks like it's a war. Like all the arrows are attacking each other. Yeah, because people were moving so once again, pure. What's pure? Even Asian. What's pure? Look at these arrows. People are moving all over the fucking place. Anyways, but then the next dotted map shows that there's more connection in Asia. The browner, the darker the brown, the more the connection to the people. In the Americas, the connection is a little bit lighter. But if you go to Europe, where that DNA also is, it's the blue means the least. So but you can see the big difference. If the first dotted map with the dots, more people of that DNA are in the Americas than even where they came from. But the second one, because the top one, just understand, is qDNA. The bottom one is cDNA. And once again, cDNA relates to the Cro-Magnons, or the first Europeans. So it's now Asian DNA, which also goes to the Americas, down to, like you said, down to the area where the Olmecs are. But also qDNA was in the Olmecs also. But anyways, so these maps are showing the relatedness to the different people. But my point is to show is, even then, Atlantis. There's no Atlantis. I can't. Here, I'll show you Atlantis. I have a map of Atlantis. Atlantis is fantasy, so I can't show it to you. But I mean, how can I find DNA for something that doesn't exist? Well, I do have a map. Where is that? I have a map of Atlantis. But it's a drawing of someone's opinion that they drew where they think, and so it's not real. But I have a map that talks about, here it is. Okay. So this is Atlantis. But remember, this is completely and utterly fantasy land. But this is where, if you listen to how Plato explains it, past the Straits of Gibraltar. So when people say it could come from Egypt, like that one guy, he's wrong, because he clearly, unless you're going to deny that he didn't know how to explain things, he says past the Straits of Gibraltar, which is where North Africa and in a sense, Spain, meet in the Mediterranean. Past that, that's where Atlantis is, and it's an island with a mountain on top of it. So, so where are you going to find a mountain on top of in the Middle East or in Egypt? Wrong. But it doesn't matter, because it was a fake fucking story, and just think that it doesn't exist in any kind of way. He said pillars of, and he's talking about in between. The pillars of Hercules? Are you saying that's not between North Africa and Spain? In fact, the Atlas Mountains, right? The pillars that holds up the world is in North Africa. Oh, I'm wrong. There's not an Atlas Mountains in North Africa. Anyways, let's talk about reality. So,
I told you he has a personality, man.
Let's talk about something else. So let's talk about the reason why people say that Plato, he clearly is talking about past the point. But let me go back to Egypt, because he likes to talk about it. So there's people that say Egypt had relations with Atlantis, right? Mm-hmm. It is accurate that Egypt had relations with the island of Crete. Island of Crete were people that then later become Proto-Greeks, okay? But at the point before Greeks and before the Mycenaeans, which are Proto also Greeks, okay, they had Linear A, right? This is the language you can go look up, Linear A. Linear A is adapted in some way from Egypt. So to say that Egypt has knowledge, or that even Greece knew that Egypt had knowledge of the islands near Greece, it did. That's a fact. That's not even fantasy. It absolutely did. And in fact, that some of the stuff, Minoan art, is semi-Egyptian. And some of their like sashes or whatever is related to the sash that in a sense, that would be worn by the Egyptian pharaohs. And they have winged sons that relate to Egyptians. And they had Egyptian glass and pottery, and Egyptian had some of their metals and had their olive oil from. So it's very well. I have a picture of that actually too, of the island of Crete.
See, this is what I like, is that you actually present stuff that people can see. It's not you just saying it. You're presenting things that people,
right, and they can go research.
Yeah, and they can go research. And a lot of people won't do research because they're stuck in their ways. They won't look at your material. They won't even consider it. They're basically stuck in their ways. And that's what I think. Like me personally, if I think Atlantis is Egypt, then I'm going to think that it could be the Richat structure. I can think of that as Cadiz. I just have to have enough evidence for me to be able to say that. Right now, which one was the actual Atlantis? I mean, anybody that says that one, like I even heard Azores, Randall Carson talks about that Azores is
But that would be more reasonable. I don't agree with it, but that would be more reasonable to what Plato said than to say the Richat structure or to say Egypt. And when people say, well, like that one guy that Egypt, had special knowledge of the, yeah, I told you that is absolute fact. Egypt had knowledge of the islands near Greece, and the glass that they sold or whatever, because the Egyptian glass and was special. It got moved even to Greece. It's in Mycenaean graves. Have stuff that is related in some way of trade with Egypt. So, yeah, the fact that saying Egypt knew about the islands, sure they did. I know that for a fact. Yeah, I agree, 100%. You can look up in any Wikipedia and find that.
I actually know the dude that been to the Richak structure, David Stig Hansen. He's actually been there 3 different times, and he's done videos. He's been there. He's been annotating, and he's very. And I've also done a discussion with Michael Donnellan, who talks about the Cadiz area, and then of course I did a discussion with Enigma. Enigma, like I said, he has a personality. He has a personality. And he talks about Egypt being Atlantis, and all 3 of those individuals and also followed what Randall Carson said, and so on and so forth. So there's like 4 or 5 different theories that I know about Atlantis and where it's at. I've actually read books from that was from Saint Germain. Elizabeth Cooper, I believe that's her name. Elizabeth Oakley Cooper, I believe it is. She's like the big dog when it comes to Saint Germain. And Saint Germain in the books about him, they actually say the Americas is the new Atlantis. That's actually what it says. And it's very interesting because Atlantis is. I've read that it's a fake story, and you have in quotations here that it's allegory, is a story interpreted to represent a meaning with moral and political significance.
Right. Because what it meant was, I found the island of Crete. So here's the island of Crete. So this shows, you can see on the picture the bulls and different stuff when you go to it. But so what the Atlantis in the sense Plato, he was saying these people stopped worshiping the gods. These people became sinful, and let's just say in a simple way for people, and thus God punished them and sunk the island. What's that now?
I'm sorry to interrupt, bro. Hey, keep your thought real quick. Don't forget your thought. Where you says Gotland, Sweden at right there.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm reading Scott Walter's book on here right now.
Yeah.
He talks a lot about Gotland in there, and Gotland just means God. And I believe in Germanic. I can't believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'll look it up just to verify. But when I hear that word or see that word, I always say Godland. I always hear it that way. So my bad, man. I'm sorry.
Right, but so what I'm trying to show here is ideas are shared, right? Which I already told you. I have a bunch of stuff on that. But if you look at the one, not the top picture, that shows the island where it is in Greece near Turkey, whatever. But then there's a little tiny map, and those arrows are showing its relations. It had relations with that island, in a sense, the islands of Cyprus, had it with Turkey, with Greece, with Egypt, with Italy. It was interacting with all those people. And also it was actually getting tin all the way from England through Spain and then England, of course. But of course, that doesn't mean that those people, Minoans, went there. It means sailors came and brought stuff eventually to them. And then they interacted with Egypt, with Cyprus, with, Greece. And so, but they were seafaring. So their ideas are a mix of couple different cultures. That's why Greeks kind of take over the island after the volcanic eruption took out Santorini. It also put waves that destroyed some of the culture and made them weaker. Crete. And you think too, where do people store boats? They either store them right on the shore near the water, or they store them in the water with a rope or something, right? So if you had a humongous tidal wave, it would have wiped out their whole navy, their whole, in a sense, ability to transport and be military. So, or at least a certain portion. So when that happened, it made them vulnerable. And then the people from Greek that were the Mycenaeans go over and kind of take over Crete. And that's when they adopt their language, Mycenaean Linear B, which is Proto-Greek in a sense, which, like I said, Linear A is what the Minoans used for like trade, because you talked about trade before. But that language is kind of, even though it's not exact hieroglyphs and stuff, it is adapted probably from Egypt. It is. So I'm just saying, him saying that Egyptians talked about the islands, sure they did. We know that for a fact. They were interacting and trading. That's not you haven't found something special and new. This is well known, the trading. And so the ideas like the snake and everything and the bull, these ideas come from other places. Indo-European gets it from here. In other words, these people, Minoans, give the ideas, some of them, to Greece. And then some of those Greece ideas then go to Italy. So the deities from all of these are somewhat similar. But like I said, these are not. So Proto-Indo-European, I'll show you another thing of Proto-Indo-European. Their belief comes from Ukraine 6,000 years ago. But all the ideas they have are not just from that area. They evolved as they move, which is like the purple is one movements, and then the red is other movements. And then down here, it shows Proto-Indo-European at 6,000 in Ukraine. And then it becomes Hittite, which is extinct, and becomes Tocharian, and comes Armenian and Greek and Albanian and Indo-Iranian, which also goes to India and becomes their language. But then Balto-Slavic, and then Germanic, and then Hellenic, and then Celtic. And Norse. And so all these are really related. So they just like I have a thing too I've showed before. This just shows how it kind of moved around. Now, this is the ones in each side of these people's faces are the light-skinned, sort of light-haired people. But these people in Ukraine are about 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. So that's when but they hadn't gone to Europe yet. They're still in Ukraine, which is, I mean, I guess Eastern Europe, but they haven't even gone to France and all that. They didn't even get over there or start getting over until 5,000. So, like I said, anyone who thinks that there was white people all over Europe, no, they weren't. They didn't get there yet. And so this kind of helps also show that when they didn't just bring their skin, they brought their religion, they brought their language and their culture.
The culture, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, and so like you talked about the sun. Now, it is a fact that the people from Ukraine's religion is in everybody's religion or something similar. I mean, but they didn't get it themselves. In other words, people in Ukraine didn't invent gods. They got it from the Middle East. The Middle East goes up there and gives them the sky god, the sun, and the earth mother. So they get it from, but they also got ideas like the shamanism from Siberia. So they mix together, like you said, Nordic. Odin is like a mix of shaman ideas from Siberia and then ideas from the Middle East, like, centrified together in a sense too. So, yeah. But I'll show you the one for. Let's see if I can find it. So it's important to understand that the reason the deities are similar all over the world is because these ideas were moving around and people adopted them, just like the Romans adopted their deities in a sense from the Greeks, and the Greeks did from the Minoans, and the Minoans did from the Middle East and from Egypt, but Egypt got their ideas from Africa and from the Middle East and from Siberia. So I mean, everybody's like, this is my picture here. This shows languages is what all the colors are. Those are language families. So everybody, like in yellow, is the same language, or language family. I should say, not same language. Language families. And then the orange is language family. And down in Africa, there's a different language families in different colors. But everybody in that language family, or a large, or some portion, I should say, everybody, have the belief, like say in Africa, of and especially in the Egypt area, of a sky mother and an earth father. And so they switch where everybody else, so they have something different. Everybody else has generally a sky father and earth mother. Although in Europe, there's as the two blue people, because some of them have a sky father and a sky mother. And then over in the Americas, like in some parts of Mexico, they have a sky father and a sky mother. And then down in Peru, sky father, sky mother. But if you go in other parts or some other parts of the Americas, it's a sky father, earth mother. But like in Northern America, Algonquin, it's a sky father and a sky mother. But if you go into the Nadane languages of Alaska and Canada, it's a sky father, earth mother. So you start to see these different areas. The Hittites were Atlanteans. Yeah, okay. Atlantis is not a place. So the Hittites are Indo-European. So no. And Indo-European comes from, you're just saying stuff. I'm explaining stuff that academics agree with. So I don't know. I'm not making up. I think this is what they think. I looked up these areas and figured out what do they actually believe, and then plotted them in a map, because then you can understand and see the connection. So I'm just saying, it's not that I'm not guessing. Oh, this is. I know the languages. I looked up. You can look it up yourself. Look up the language, and then.
No, I agree with you. I think.
Well, that's
I think
talking to him, not
No. I always tell him that, you got to read a lot of sources. Like, it takes a lot of time. Like, it really takes. Like, I'm like you right now. I've read so many books that I'm at the point where I'm confident in what I say, and I don't have to read all these other sources. A lot of people see, this is what I've learned through my journey. You can read thousands and thousands of books, but if those thousands and thousands of books is based off of just one source or two sources, then you didn't really read anything. You read somebody who read those two sources and came up with thousands and different ideas and theories. That's what you've read. Now, what you have to focus on is that actual science, something that's been replicated over and over again through science. And if anybody has a problem with that science, then get the funds together to argue that science. Okay, that's what you need to do. Don't argue that somebody said, hey, scientifically, I came up with this idea and this been repeated over and over again, and it seems to add up. And then you turn around and say, hey, well, that doesn't make sense because this person said this. Have you, first of all, when anything that it comes into mythologies and stuff like that, I want to learn the culture, first of all.
Yeah.
I want to understand the culture. And the reason why is because the culture would determine how I understand those groups of people. Every culture is different. People from up north is different from people down south. Some people call it pop. Some people call it soda. Some people call it soda pop. You know what I mean? But they understand each other. But in the essence, in reality, you got Pepsi and Coke. They definitely taste different, right? So you have to understand that. Why do some people call Pepsi, Coke sometimes? It's just the way that people adapt languages. It's the way that people take language and say, okay, I've heard this enough. I understand it. This is what we're going to use. So we both understand. Language science is very important. If you can understand what a cross means here, you're going to understand what a cross means there. What's the earliest form of that cross, right? What is the earliest form of that cross? And then you got to look at the earliest form of that language, and you can kind of put things together when you go through different, avenues of approach on stuff. But it takes time. It doesn't. It's almost like patterns. I hear a lot of people talk about high IQ and stuff like that. Well, high IQ is just basically understanding patterns. That's anything. It boils down to the simplistic way of just understanding what patterns is. And
But I think
humans have
also it has to do with the willingness, like you talked about before. My IQ is high, but it's not so high that it's above everybody. I have a 1 in 35 IQ, which is lowest of the, in a sense, genius gifted. So it's not like, but I think it's also like we talked about before. I am willing to make strong statements, but I'm also willing to say, hey, I was in error or I'm wrong. Like that to me, I think is more important to learning than, like you said, some people get ideas, even if they're smart, and then they never change.
Yeah.
And so they don't adapt to the new things. And so he has academic essay to back it up. Okay, but I already talked to you before. So there's a difference between having an academic understanding, and then this is a logical fallacy. So he's doing an argument from which he said he knows philosophy. So in philosophy, there's an argument from authority. In other words, like if I said, well, because I have a psychology degree, I can then talk about everything in psychology. You know that's wrong, right? Mm-hmm. So just like if an archaeologist says, well, because I'm an archaeologist, every word that comes out of my mouth about archaeology is correct. Yeah, no one would agree. That's so just saying you're an academic, which I'm not, by the way. I'm not an academic. I'm self-taught. I have a BA in psychology, but I turned atheist because of archaeology and mythology understanding.
It's funny you say that, because I always tell people this. You can have all the academic peer-reviewed articles that back you up, but guess what? There are just amount of academic and peer-reviewed articles that will say that you're wrong. Every peer-reviewed article that you read out there, there's going to be a peer-reviewed article that goes against it. I don't think people understand that. There's no set establishment for a peer-reviewed article. You know, one institution, Harvard, can have their own peer-reviewed article, and then MIT can have their own peer-reviewed article. And they can go.
Most of the time, it's you say peer-reviewed article. It depends on what you're saying, because like I just did one on the Milky Way, but then in the last section, which some good peer-reviewed article do, I talked about the limitations that I have, that I'm trying to do too big. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. But I'm acknowledging that I am trying to put so many things together of archaeology and DNA and things, which there's a lot of room for error. I'm not saying that I have it, but you have to acknowledge. So I think a good peer review article also acknowledges limitations, not just.
But that's and that's what I'm saying, is that there's no real a peer review article is basically. I have a peer reviewed article too from Dr. Keith Chang, the same person that came up with the Nike, published it in my book. There is no set establishment or grounds or group of individuals that say, hey, all peer review articles goes through here. Like I said, MIT can have their own peer review article and Harvard can have their own. Saying that you have stuff backed up by academics, I have, okay, so I use Oxford a lot, right? Stephanie Dolly's from Oxford University too, where she wrote books under Oxford University also, if I'm not mistaken. But she has a different idea of who the Anuna / the Anunnaki are, but they both have PhDs. So you can have, I always tell people this, just because you can have two PhD representatives with different ideas and writing different academic published articles and peer-reviewed articles and books and all this. So you can't go off of that. You have to go, like I said earlier, what I like to do is, if somebody says, and we'll just use, because Enigma always talks about Atlantis, if somebody says Atlantis is here, I'm going to find somebody that can counter it. And I'm going to see what their credentials are, what they have, what sources they use, and I'm going to line it up. And if I have the opportunity to ask the person why they think this place is Atlantis, I'm going to ask them legit questions. And if they can't answer it, then that's telling me they're creating a narrative. I feel like a lot of people try to create narratives because they want to be right about stuff. They don't want the truth. They want their name edged in stone, meaning that this person came up, this person found Atlantis. No, you didn't find Atlantis on yourself. You became curious, just like everybody else did, read Plato's books, Try to do your due diligence. And this is what you said. For everybody and the crazy thing is that in this historical world, you will find somebody that says almost everything that we said and we talked about, plus or minus, in every single book. There's millions of books out there. Everything that
Yeah.
I've learned literally comes from books. So I'm sure that somebody else said it. They just don't get the recognition they deserve. And that's what a lot of
And
these
like you
big
said
shots.
too, sometimes it's interpretation. So the
Yeah.
two bottom pictures, right? There's three, one in the middle, but there's which all three, right? So there's three pictures, but the two bottom pictures and the third one in the middle all have animals that are twisting their necks.
Mm.
But that doesn't actually, so it's interpretation of mine and academics that they might relate. But that, like you said about interpretation, that doesn't mean they really do.
Yeah.
But all
It could
these
be
are
a pattern.
but right, I'm just showing the pattern. Just like in the top black picture, it shows Egypt and Iran. It looks like those like snakes with stars or something in the middle are similar. But it's an interpretation, like you were saying. It's my interpretation that those are similar. Maybe they came up with them and they're not related. I think that there's, for me personally, but it's my opinion, that there's so many things that are very similar. The similarity is a guess. The things are a fact. It's a fact they look like that. It's my speculation that they might be related. See what I'm saying? That's what people also get confused. They get confused in the difference in a fact. It's a fact that's what they look like. It's not a fact that they relate.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
my
that's what I said.
speculation. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it's a pattern. I mean, but we also
Right.
have to think about, the animals or the idea behind it. Could it be for medical? Absolutely. Eventually, it became for medical. Maybe
Correct.
the two interpretations eventually became one interpretation. That's what a
Right.
lot of people don't understand, is that it eventually became one interpretation. A great example of that is the etymology dictionary. Okay. I love the etymology dictionary, and I have one, both digital and hard copy. I also have plenty of books on symbols and symbolism. One thing that I've learned is that you have to go to the meaning of the word that it meant at that time frame, meaning that this word changes what it means over time. I've seen where one word meant something in 1300, and now in 2025, it does not mean that at all. And we know that, or 2026, I should say now, that we know that, right? So words change over time. So when you quote the Roman Empire, you need to go to what that word meant in the Roman Empire time frame. If you quote the Mesopotamians, you need to quote what it meant at that time frame of the Mesopotamians. No different than the Egyptians, the Latin language, the Peruvians. It doesn't matter what it is. You cannot use your 2026 vocabulary dictionary words and apply it to what it meant thousands and thousands of years ago. It does not work that way. One, you're using an English word that's mostly Western, that is mostly culturally, right? Because here in the South, I'm wearing a cowboy hat. Let me tell you, I already told you, my father's African American, my mother's German. I have nothing to do with cowboys. I grew up, the only thing that I remember, my pops, we used to watch Westerns all the time when I was a little kid. One thing about me is I don't like to be like everybody else. I like to be different, meaning that I like different things. I don't push myself to like different things. I just like different things. I used to wear a lot of fitted hats when I was younger, all the time, fitted hats. Different basketball teams, I had a fitted hat for every outfit that I wore, every time a fitted hat. Then I started hating all the politics and everything in sports and stuff like that. So I stopped wearing fitted hats representing basketball teams, football teams, so on and so forth. So I always wanted, when I was a little kid, I always wanted cowboy boots. I always just wanted the cowboy boots. That's all I just ever wanted, was just cowboy boots. And my parents never got them for me. I got older and turned about 40-something years old, and I said, I'm going to buy me some cowboy boots. Well, when I was in a cowboy store, the dude convinced me to buy a cowboy hat. Ever since I've been wearing this cowboy hat, I've been having a lot of luck happen to me. I call it my lucky hat. But it's a style of mine, and it's because I'm trying to create a brand, rebirth of the word. I wrote a book, I got a website, I got YouTube, I got Rumble, I got Spotify, I got merchandise, I got all kinds of stuff. And I did everything just because I have a passion for it, right? I don't really make any money from this. Yes, I am monetized now. There was a while ago when I could, just actually a few days ago when I could say I wasn't monetized, but I just got accepted for the monetization on X because I reached my 5 million impressions. So I can't say I'm not monetized anymore. But the only thing that I can say is my website is for free. Everything that I talk about, everything that I do is somewhere on my website. It's updated. It has a link to videos that I have that I talk about certain things. That's my baby. My website's my baby. And it's free. No ads, no nothing. You don't have to go in there and see a whole bunch of ads or anything like that.
All right.
And the only reason why I like doing this is because this is my passion. I enjoy this. And what I've learned is that some people take this and they're very serious about trying to make money off this. And if they feel like if they go back on their word, like if they say, well, yeah, my research says that this is incorrect, they won't say that because they feel like that people will stop listening to them and be like, see, they're wrong. Those people don't care about you in the first place. If somebody's etching for you to go ahead and say, hey, I was wrong about this, and they stop following you and this, that, and the third, if they didn't stop following you when you were wrong in the first place, and instead of you admitting that you were wrong, they wanted you to be on a downfall anyway. So they were waiting and lurking for that anyway. That's why one of the things that I do is when people present evidence to me, I look at it and I really look. You don't have to read thousands of books anymore. Literally, I tell people if they want to know about ancient Egyptian history, just read the coffin text, the pyramid text, and the Egyptian Book of the Dead. That's all you got to do. Now, if you want everybody's opinions and theories and all this other stuff of what they researched and what they understand from that, then you can read other people's material. But if you just want to know what they said in the coffin text, the pyramid text, and the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, that's where most people are going to get all their information about the gods in the first place anyway. And you can be an expert just in that, but people are too busy trying to prove that this is fact over fiction, so they go find other sources. And some people like me and you, we just want to know more about it. Like, and I give a good example. When I read that Enoch was in the Bible, I wanted to know more about Enoch. So I learned that there was the book of Enoch. So I went and bought that book, and I went to go read the book of Enoch. It wasn't because I wanted to know was God fake or not. It's interesting you say you're an atheism, and we're at 2 hours now. I usually stop at about this time frame anyway, and that's why I asked you if we could keep going, because we have a good conversation. But I do want to say this because I know a lot of people are probably like, oh man, y'all going past 2 hours. The idea when it comes to who gods are and where these gods came from and stuff like that, there's a whole bunch of theories, and everybody can say what they want to say. But they have to understand that you have to go to the interpretation of that time frame. You have to go to the earliest known origins of what was said about that individual and understand it from that point. It's easier to go to watch a YouTube video for an hour and two and say, oh yeah, I know what this person said and this, that. But people say things and we mess up things and we say incorrect things while we're talking sometimes. And you have to be very careful about that. But that's why I like when people go watch my videos and say, hey, I think you said this wrong. I haven't had it happen to me yet, but I like when I see people say you said this wrong, and then people reply and say, yeah, I didn't mean that. This is what I meant. Because that means you're paying attention and you want to better yourself. You're not trying to sell something to somebody. And I feel like a lot of people are trying to sell this historical stuff. And I think the original stories that I've learned, basically just off of the academic side, the peer review article side, the book side, my due diligence, and so on and so forth, these stories are amazing by itself. Like, you don't have to make up something for it to be crazy. If you believe that there were white people that came from somewhere else, I'm telling you, if I was to tell you my theory, you'll be crazy. You'll be like, well, and maybe when we get offline, I'll tell you about it one day. We could probably have an actual discussion about it, and we won't have to. And it would just be something that I do because I really have a theory out there about a lot of different things, and it's not just because I think I'm right.
But also, just so you know, and everyone knows, even though online, if I say something is wrong, I'm not being aggressive. I know it's hard to read intent online.
Yeah, a lot of people. Yeah,
well, I'm just saying, as you see, talking to me, I'm a laid back person. I'm not.
That's what.
I just have strong opinions, but I'm actually pretty laid back. And if you really notice, I don't call people names very rarely, right? Almost never.
I do. As soon as they call me a name,
I usually call their behavior bad in generally. But even people I disagree with, I generally don't say a lot because I make errors too. And that's what I was telling you. I am willing to be wrong. And also, like when people do things wrong or whatever, make errors is what I generally try to say, because an error just means I'm taking away any kind of emotional baggage. I don't know why you made the error. Sometimes I say things because my brain's not thinking that day. I mean, I know a lot, but knowing stuff from 1,000,000 years to 4,000, it's easy for me to make a mistake. Like one of the people in your video, he said the wrong time. I could do that. I didn't, call him names. I just said he made an error, because I do that too sometimes. I've made errors where I
Yeah, a
didn't
lot of people
remember
don't understand that,
correctly.
bro.
Like if I would have showed you these artifacts, I would have forgot they're from Romania without looking at it. If I just talked about it, I might have thought it was from Ukraine, because I know it relates to, or to me it relates to, because it's my interpretation, to the Sky Father, Earth Mother deities, probably a divine couple. But the real fact is these are just artifacts, and we don't know what the fuck we know they were worshiping them or some kind of an idol, but we don't know there's no written of what they were. So it's just my opinion. They look like the Sky Father, Earth Mother, and it may not be. But I'm just saying I make errors too, because there's so much data. It's easy to do. So I also, like, I see some, in other words, I don't try to debunk people. Like, I just make it a comment. Some archaeologists or people try to debunk people. I don't do that. I just say this is an error to me, or this is inaccurate, or whatever. I try to take the emotional stuff out of it, because also I don't know why everyone's doing things. You know what I'm saying? And even if they did, let's say they have not good intentions. That doesn't mean still that I feel confident to just be mean to them. I try to show people so that, because to me, like you, I feel, well, what really matters to me is just the truth. I don't feel like it's a war we're having. I feel like we're trying to find out. I don't know everything. I learn stuff all the time. There, like you said, even if all the stuff I've learned, there's like, millions of more things I could learn. And so also, because there's so much different things, there's a lot of times you can make errors, intentionally or not. And so that's why I tell people, if you can debunk my stuff, or you can tell me I did something wrong or could do it better, let me know, because I want to be accurate.
Nah, I appreciate that you put it in that way. That's a perfect way to end it, And I'll say this, and don't go nowhere when I close this out, because I do want to talk to you offline. But I agree with you. If I say something wrong, just tell me. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people are looking for somebody's downfall rather than just trying to get the information. Like, hey, you said this wrong, blah 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 blah, or you said that wrong. Okay, I might have did. You know what? I actually tell people this all the time, or I used to say it early on. I have a brain injury. I was wounded in combat, and I got a moderate TBI. So sometimes my brain works differently than my mouth. Like, my mouth will go one way, my brain goes the other way. But I do have a lot of information. My credentials is my X account. Anybody that wants to ask me what my credentials are, 10 minutes of your day, not even 5 minutes of your day, not even 2 minutes out of your day, not even 1 minute of your day, you scroll through my Twitter X account. All you're going to do is see me sharing pictures of books, what I've read from a book, a representation from a book, a peer-reviewed article, something. It's going to show you what I've read. Now, does it say what I've, when I'm talking, usually comes 99.9% of the time comes from something that I've read. I don't have a dog in this fight, whether it's right or wrong. What I do have a fight in is what source that I can use. So when I ask for a source, just give me one. And then when I have questions, answer the questions. Don't give me a source and not answer my questions later, because I am going to do my respectful diligence to not just me, but to you, to see if you were accurate. If you want people to believe what you say, I am the wrong person to give any source to, because I'm going to tell you, if I find what you say wrong, I'm going to say, hey, you're not wrong in the sense of me being an asshole. You're wrong because you might have not known this, and that's okay. And the reason why I know this is because your expertise is in this field. My expertise is in probably this field here, right? And we have to work together as one to get to the source that we want. I think that when if Atlantis is ever found, if the first humans ever found on this planet, how far it goes back, whether that nobody's going to remember the person that found it. They're going to remember everybody that was involved, even the people who were incorrect. Why? Because the people who are incorrect are usually the ones who are inspiring the ones to find the correct information. So just because you're incorrect right now doesn't mean you weren't an inspiration. You were just incorrect in your information, but the inspiration to find that information came from that incorrect person. That's what I want people to understand.
Speaking of which, that's interesting. You did it. That one of my archaeology anthropology friends, John Hoops, he actually started because of Atlantis and Chariots of the Gods and all this kind of ideas. So he didn't start as an academic. He started, like you said, interested in all this stuff. And then he wanted to know if it's true. And so he learned more stuff. In fact, he originally wanted to do stuff with the Olmecs and with Mexico. But when the academic thing said, put down where you want to go, he said Central America, not understanding geography, that he really wanted Southern North America. So he ended up doing work in Central America where he didn't want to go, because they're like, great, no one wants to go there. And so it was a complete accident because of not knowing, like you said, about people knowing stuff, about not knowing, geography of like what, constitutes, Mexico is not Central America.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So my point is that it just shows that he didn't start as an academic. He ended up as an academic. He didn't start learning about, the Olmecs as he wanted to. He had heard stuff and then misunderstood and ended up learning about South America. So I'm just saying, I agree with you. But it should be a willingness just to learn. It shouldn't be like you said. It's not a fight. That's why I told you I really don't do debates, because I'm open to amend my thinking. Like you said, if I can be proven to be in error, and so because my goal isn't winning, my goal is the truth.
Yeah, exactly. And that's that. I couldn't have said that. Anybody couldn't have said that better. Nobody, because that's perfectly said from a perfect individual such as yourself when you come up to this information, because I've been looking at your stuff for a while, and I really like how you're just straightforward. And a lot of people, I don't know why people read a message and get very defensive, because you read it in a tone that you're going to use, not the tone that somebody else is using. You're using the tone that's in your own head. So when you think somebody's being aggressive to you, you're really being aggressive to what they are. You're presenting that. That's why when people block me over a message rather than talking to me on the phone or talking to me personally, that tells me that the whole time you had an issue with me, because in reality, you can't go off of feelings off of words. Once you do that, you lose all arguments in the first place, I think, personally.
Just like, I agree, just like Jimmy Corsetti. I never said one bad word to him ever. I just mentioned, here's some evidence. He blocked me. Didn't even have like you and me have had a conversation. It didn't even get that far. It was like he said something. I posted, here's some information. No negative, no attack, and he just immediately blocked me. I find that to be absolutely ridiculous. Even if, that you said about Enigma. Enigma has been arguing and saying I'm wrong and he's right, right? But I haven't blocked him. I won't block him unless he starts calling me names. Now, if he intentionally, because I don't know intent in conversations, but if you call me a fucking asshole or, say that I'm intentionally, ignorant and stupid, or start calling me names, we're done. I don't put up with people attacking and abusing me. And that includes atheists. I've had people think that because they're atheists, they can also talk to me any way they fucking want. And I'm sorry. I have this respect for my own self that I try to treat others as I want to be treated, as like the Bible. In a sense, I want to be treated with respect. I try to treat other people with respect. And so when they don't treat me with respect, I don't feel a need to allow them in my life.
All right. I agree. I agree. So we'll end it right there. Hey man, Damien, I appreciate this, bro. This was honor. I know we're probably gonna have more discussions, man.
Oh
I got
yeah,
a lot of
definitely.
topics and stuff. I appreciate everybody for listening. We got about close to 100 people just watching the live stream, and that, of course, the numbers are going to go up later. People are going to watch it later. This was an interesting topics, I should say. I'm just like you. You know, I don't really do debates. I don't really like debates too much. The only reason why is because nobody really likes to do a debate themselves. I don't have a problem calling somebody an idiot if they call me an idiot. I give the energy that I get in return. I give it back out. It's just only because it's entertainment. I always say social media is Jerry Springer to me. I grew up on Jerry Springer, so I always say
Yeah.
it's Jerry Springer to me. It's entertainment. I only get on social media really when I'm taking a break from reading or doing something on my computer. So, and I know a lot of people have said, "Man, you're always on Twitter or X or X Twitter or whatever." And I say, "No, I'm not. I just have 30. I literally keep 30 scheduled posts on X, so that way, even if I go incognito for a few days, you won't know because there's always going to be something being posted because I'm always trying to throw out some knowledge out there. So I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate what you do. Check out his website, check out his account. It's all said in the beginning, man. Until next time, like I always say, man, knowledge is power.